So it looks like another mega church is involved with another scandal, this time being Elevation Church, as they have fired a youth pastor named Tim Saunders amid abuse investigation that's going on, and which is linked to a Texas mega church. As this youth pastor, as you're going to find out as we go through this article and bring up a few different talking points, was connected to it. Honestly, there's a lot of different things that we can kind of draw out of this and talk about. So we're going to hit that up over on this episode. But first, let's go ahead and jump into the article. I do want to point out that these right now are allegations. We don't know a lot, as there is a lot still out there. There's a lot of he said, she said, things of that nature. But what we're just going to go over is the facts. And then we're going to talk about lessons learned and various aspects from this. So let's go ahead and jump in. So you can see here from the title, Elevation Church, which is pastored by Stephen Furtick, one of the more notorious megachurch pastors in the United States, known for his lavish living and very secretive paycheck and how they conduct business, things of that nature. Let's go ahead and move into this article. So, nevertheless, it's talking about a very popular person here, or at least the church's pastor is very popular. It says here Tim Saunders, or Sommer, sorry, a youth pastor with Stephen Furtick's Elevation Church in North Carolina, was fired from his role after he was accused of engaging in an inappropriate conduct with former students at Oaks Church in Texas, where he served as an intern and staff member more than 10 years ago. Now, one of the things that I'm going to get into, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more, is the seriousness of when you are choosing leaders, when you are choosing ministry leaders inside your church, you need to make sure that you are following 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 7, because that's the qualification for leaders in the church. Specifically, it says an overseer. You can apply this to any type of leadership inside the church. This person, from what we know about him so far, has been thrusted into leadership positions at a very, very young age. And as you can see here in 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 6, one of these qualifications is he must not be a new convert, or he might become conceited and incur the same condemnation as the devil. Meaning people who are young are very easy to be tempted. They might come conceited. They're given this platform and this position where they can talk and have authority over people and things of that nature, authority. And they can become conceited, and that could lead to sin. That's why we don't put new converts up there. We don't put such young people up there. They need time to learn and grow inside their faith. Let's go ahead and jump back to the article. So it says here, recently, allegations were brought forth about Tim Saunders' conduct while serving at a church in Texas approximately 12 years ago. A spokesperson for Elevation Church told the Christian Post on Monday. As soon as Elevation learned about these allegations, we reached out to the local Texas authorities and immediately placed Tim on leave. No charges have been filed, but Tim understands how impactful these allegations are for his role in our ministry, and we have agreed that he will no longer serve on staff. So, a couple things to take note. One, it seems like Elevation isn't messing around. With all the church scandals and everything going on, I'm sure they don't want a bigger black eye than they already have with all the scandals and things surrounding their senior pastor. So they're not taking any chances. And at the slightest smell of an allegation, they went, looks like they did some digging. Yes, I know I'm talking positive about Elevation Church here a little bit. That's crazy, I know. But they did some digging. They called in and they saw it serious enough to go ahead and remove this person, which, number one, is the right thing to do. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say number two, this is why we as Christians should be doing background checks on people. And we talked about this just a few episodes ago, that Christians should be doing background checks. Churches should be checking who they are placing into these positions. This shouldn't just be an easy walk-on thing. Background checks need to be done, calling references, calling past churches, things of that nature. These things need to be done. That's how we prevent this from happening. Kathy jumps in. She says, at least they did address it right away. That's rare now. Yeah, I mean, sadly, too often you see people aren't addressing it. They're like waiting too long. Now, don't get me wrong. I do believe that if an allegation comes up, we need to be careful. If I was a church leader and an allegation came up against someone on my staff or in, co-pastors with me, whatever the case may be, that I would go ahead and want to investigate it, but we investigated fast. That's what it looks like Elevation did. Too Legit writes in, he says, Elevation, it's in North Carolina. What does Texas have to do with it? Well, as we're going to find out here in the article, this pastor who's jumped around from various churches was involved in a church in Texas when these happened, but now is working over at Elevation. Well, now fired. And once Elevation found out, they call back and they figure out, oh, hey, yeah, this guy seems like he's guilty of what he's doing. We're going to go ahead and basically fire him. So he is no longer on staff with them. Let's keep reading through the article. It says in a statement to the Christian Post on Monday, Red Oaks Police Department Chief Police of Garland Wolf confirmed, of Police Garland Wolf confirmed that no charges have yet been filed against Sommers, but he has been named in their ongoing investigation of, quote, serious allegations that can or will impact a person's life for many years, end quote. So once again, Elevation Church, what it looks like was they made the call, they heard the evidence, and it was enough for them to go, hey, we don't want anything to do with this. It goes on to say, we are still attempting to narrow down the timeline of events, the actual location of the offenses, who may have been involved as suspects, and who may have been involved as victims. Further, the investigation is being conducted to determine what and if anything occurred on church property or in the jurisdiction of Red Oaks, Texas, Wolf said. Christian Post reached out to Sommers for comment on the allegations, and a response is still pending. The investigation to Sommers is connected to last month's firing, and you may recognize this person, of Jerry Nickerson from his role as the student pastor of Hope Fellowship Frisco West Campus after he voluntarily confessed to engaging in a, quote, inappropriate contact with a minor, end quote, in other words, SA, 10 years earlier at Oaks Church. That's this fellow right here. He's been all over the news with this. Personally, I just haven't covered it. There have been too many other things, but it seems appropriate to go ahead and bring up now. It says here, shortly after Nickerson's confession at Oaks Church confirmed in an email sent to congregants on January 11th that Nickerson's abuse was connected to his time with his congregation or with the congregation. Quote, this week we have become aware of a situation that was disclosed by a former youth ministry intern who served at Oaks Church and sent in an email to the church from pastors Chris and Kara Rayleigh, right there, big red sign, female pastor, but continuing on. This former intern, who was serving as a youth pastor at another church, disclosed to that church's leadership that he had inappropriate contact with a minor who attended Oaks Youth at the time. The email continued, to ensure the matter is properly investigated, we quickly reported the matter to the Red Oaks Police Department. Once again, obviously this church does not take their leadership seriously. As you saw, they do have a woman pastor, but obviously hiring people without really doing thorough, proper background checks on them. Now, to be fair, you could say that maybe there was nothing wrong in the past. If you're doing things like this, just let's keep going. Lieutenant Jason Esquibil, oh boy, I don't know if I said that right. Public information officer for the Red Oaks Police Department told the Dallas Morning News last month that a representative from Oaks Church made a report to his department following Nickerson's confession and their January 11th email to Oaks Church congregants. Pastors Chris and Kara Rayleigh shared more about the abuse allegations during a worship service on January 19th. They talked about how they were devastated from this, and this happened approximately 10 years ago, yada, 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 and so on. As an Oaks Church spokesperson confirmed with the Christian Post that Sommers served as an intern at the church from 2009 to 2011. Sommers, now once again the Elevation Church guy, and then worked on staff from 2011 to 2013. Following additional allegations after Nickerson's confession, a source who asked not to be identified told the Christian Post Sommers has been accused of inappropriate conduct and the police had been notified. Survivor advocate A.V. Smith reported last Thursday that Sommers had been fired for the allegations of the essay. While noting that they expect to move forward with their case soon, Chief Wolf made it clear that the investigation remains ongoing and will be thorough. It says here, Mr. Tim Sommers' name has come up, but no charges against him have been filed at this time. And as previously stated, this is an ongoing investigation, meaning they're digging into it. It says here, our detectives are working and have been working diligently to gather facts and statements to further our investigation, which we will hope will lead to an ultimate resolution of these allegations against several persons. I cannot speak to what information the Oaks Church is putting out to their congregation or the public or where they have derived their information, he added. These are serious allegations that can and will impact a person's life for many years, and we are doing what we need to do to seek justice for the victims, prosecute the offenders, and exonerate the innocent as may be the case. We are scheduling meetings with persons who have come forward, and we are conducting interviews and taking statements from those who want to cooperate with our investigation. We hope to move forward soon. Okay, so now that we got through the article, I want to go through a few talking points. But before we do that, I do want to jump over to some of the comments here. Pathway to Truth is saying, I think the Lord is shaking the churches and removing the bad fruit. He wants a holy church that truly loves him. And I believe he is coming back soon. And it's funny you mentioned that, Pathway, because there's another passage that I had up here that I wanted to bring up because that's exactly it. One thing that, while it's sad to see all these things going on, another thing that we should be happy for is that the Lord is shaking that bad fruit off the tree. It says here, this is what the Lord says in Ezekiel chapter 34, verse 10. This is a little out of context, but I think the same principle applies. It says, this is what the Lord God says. Look, I am against the shepherds. I will demand my flock from them and prevent them from shepherding the flock. The shepherds will no longer feed themselves, for I will rescue my flock from their mouths so that they will not be food for them. Talking about wolves among the sheep. This is what God's doing inside the church. That's what I believe. Once again, this passage a little bit out of context given the setting that it was taken in, but the general principle remains the same. That is what I believe God is doing. Going back to the comments, Kathy writes in and says, so much of this going on. These pastors should have to all work as teams at all times for accountability. Can anyone be trusted to serve alone with our youth? Once again, very sad. And this is another thing, that I kind of wanted to talk about was I think we place way too much emphasis on youth groups. And I think a big problem with that, honestly, is our parents. Back when Rick Warren did his little search when he was trying to establish Saddleback Church, one of the things he did was he went door to door and asked people, hey, what do you want to see in a church? Why don't you go to church? He wanted to talk to the unchurched and ask, why are you not going to church? One of the things that was brought up was, I want more youth services for my kids. Sadly, I don't think that's a very good thing. While I'm not against youth service and stuff like that, or Wednesday night or whatever, what I am not for are parents being separated from their children at church. Elevation Church, of course, if you did not know, has a reputation for coveting very much their worship experience, even to the point where if your kid seems a little bit unruly, they will ask you to leave or take your kid out. I am a person who believes that a child should be sitting with their parent during the worship service. Granted, I understand to an extent, some kids may be very, very unruly, running around screaming, things of that nature. But as often as you can, I think your child should be right next to you. I know my son, he's 11 months old. I have him sitting right next to me throughout church all the time. Granted, he's not understanding what's going on, but I want to build that. And I want to be able to take him to church, sit down with me, sit next to me, listen to the same message that I'm listening to so I could take him and talk with him, when we go out to lunch afterwards, or maybe around the dinner table that night about what the pastor talked about, and we can learn and grow together. I think we place way too much emphasis on youth pastors, and at that, not to bug out on a person's appearance because we should look deeper than that, but does this honestly look like somebody who you would trust with your kids? I mean, a 30-something-year-old man with bleached blonde hair, because that's not his natural hair color, dressed like that's not how a pastor would dress. I'm not so big on the whole wardrobe protocol and all that stuff, but come on, at least have a little bit of reverence for God in the way that you dress. I wouldn't look at this person and go, yeah, I can totally trust my kid with them. That's just me. Faith and Photos writes on, says, ongoing investigation tells you that their comments will be limited so as not to compromise the investigation. Faith and Photos has a background in this, so he has a lot of good information when it comes to this type of stuff, and that's exactly it. It's going to be limited so they don't compromise the investigation. We need to let the investigation process go forward. Now, this person could be completely innocent for all we know. Could be. We have no idea. We do know, once again, Elevation did call back to the police office, and they saw enough information from what they saw to go ahead and fire this person, let them go. Now, they could be doing that as a knee-jerk reaction because they don't want to get wrapped up in all the abuse scandals like so many other churches, or there was sufficient evidence in their eyes that they were like, yeah, we need to let this guy go. Elaine at Psalm 91 writes in, says, makes me wonder if this has gone on forever and was hidden because there was no internet previously, but now it's easier to find out and report since the internet availability. It seems, yeah, honestly, I think you're right, Elaine, personally. I do think these things were going on behind closed doors before the internet, before things happened. You could just imagine it. As long as there is sin inside the world, as long as there is depravity inside the world, things like this are going to happen. And I think just with the invention of the internet, now what I don't think also helps though is the rise of seeker-sensitive megachurches that throw the authority of the gospel out the wind, that throw reverence for God outside. They don't care about those things. They're trying to be hip. They're trying to be cool. They're trying to be relevant. They're trying to be pragmatic, using the ways of the world to attract people of the world. I think that also adds in some hurt because therefore, when you do that, you're going to bring in less qualified people to lead that church, in the elders, in the deacons, in the pastors. That's just my opinion. Feel free to disagree with me. Elaine also says, though, either way, I'm so thankful it is being exposed. Too Legit chimes in and says, 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 19, there must be factions among you in order that those who are genuine among you may be recognized. Yes, Paul talking about factions. That was kind of a funny verse to bring up too, because, it just the way, if you get a chance, go read the entire thing in 1 Corinthians chapter 3. But it shows what Paul is saying is it shows, even though factions are not good, the factions that are among you in a way are good because you can now identify those who are going to be causing divisions inside that church. That's what that passage is basically saying. And he corrects himself, said it's actually 1 Corinthians 11:19. Thank you very much for that correction right there. Never want to be putting out false data. So I appreciate your own correction to yourself. Faith and Photo says forensic phone dumps in these types of cases are golden to see what's going on. Yeah. And you wonder, especially in today's digital age, I think the things that you did, especially for these younger guys in their 30s that are coming up in these youth roles. I don't know how old he is. I'm just guessing by how old he looks. The stuff that you did over text messages, technology that we haven't had, until the last 40 years, you're going to see, actually not even 40 years, 30 years, when you really think about it, 30, 25. This is going to bring up so much more as these text messages could get subpoenaed. Who knows how far back they go? That's a great point, Faith and Photos. Kathy likes the good point on the megachurch. And Pathway says most churches have moved away from the Bible. And sadly, you can see that as we embrace that seeker-sensitive model of wanting to find people who ultimately can't worship God because they're not Christians to come to our church, all in the sake of saying for reaching the lost. When, if you want to ask me, the church's role, as in the place we gather, was never meant to seek out and save the lost. When we gather together, we offer worship to God. The saints are learning. And then once those saints go out, the sheep go out, they begot more sheep. The job of evangelism is on the people inside those pews, inside those seats, inside those church walls. That's the job of the people. The church itself is a place for the Christian to worship God and grow. That's what churches are for. All right, so just to go over a couple talking points of this. Number one, the seriousness of the allegations. So we saw Elevation Church fired them very fast, like we talked about, after they called and saw what I believe probably sufficient enough evidence in their eyes, basically saying that they have zero tolerance against this. Another thing we need to know is the role of churches handling misconduct. This is a rare case where you see something happen very, very fast. Normally, as some of the commenters pointed out, this is something that normally is slow rolled and takes forever, as we want to be very careful. Now, like I said, we do need to be careful. We need to make sure that we aren't just receiving allegations and acting as if they are true, but investigating. That's the important thing. But we need to be expedient in our investigation. And definitely the person in question should probably be removed from that ministry role until exonerated. I mean, this is what we do in the Army. In the Army, if a leader has an accusation against them, that leader is moved from their leadership position. And then as the investigation goes on and they find out that leader is good to go, they're go ahead and move back into position. Now, with ratings and things like that, some people don't like that system because they would seem that it's unfair because they're losing out on that leadership time that's so needed for promotion and things of that nature. But that's besides the fact. You don't want to keep someone in leadership who could potentially be guilty. Um, Another thing, church culture, celebrity pastors. We need to move away from the celebrity pastor mindset that we have gotten so much here, especially in the West and America with big names and big churches. And we're looking for charismatic people who can talk rather than people who are biblically qualified, going back to First Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 7. Just because you can talk, just because you are extrovert, just because you are very charismatic in your speaking, does not mean you are called to preach the word. In fact, when you go to the qualifications, being able to publicly talk and speak is not a qualification whatsoever. It's all based off of a person's character if you go on to look at it, and also that the person must be able to teach. Doesn't mean they have to be able to uh, be great extemporaneous speakers. They just need to be able to teach, which is a gift from God. Another thing we need to look at is the impact on churches and community. What the outside world sees going on with these mega churches is the impression that they're going to get of churches all over the place. Granted, scandals happen in small churches too. It's just not as highly advertised because obviously they're smaller churches. But the one thing that I will always say about a smaller church, and I've been in both worlds throughout my Christian walk of life, I've been in both worlds. There is so much more accountability in the smaller church. Everybody knows each other. There isn't people just, there aren't people just hiding in the background. There isn't some elder board that you have never met before, or some pastor that takes 3 months to go see because of all the gateways to go ahead and see him because he's acting more like a CEO than a pastor. The smaller church, you don't have that. There's so much more accountability there. Now, you can also say that there's the propensity to cover up things even more. But with today's day and age, like I said, with God exposing things, with the internet, things of that nature, it seems like that is going away more and more and more, and less layers for them to protect themselves for those who are wolves amongst the sheep. And lastly, moving forward, what can we learn from this? Basically all the things that we talked about. So, how can churches prevent these situations in the future? Number one, do better background checks on people. Put in biblically qualified people into these positions. And you may ask, hey, well, Tim, what if this person was biblically qualified before? One, I don't believe God calls people to ministry only for them to go ahead and fade away. I believe God takes that, and this is coming from my own opinion. I'm not seeing something, in the Bible where it says a key verse like this, but I truly believe if God calls someone to ministry, it's because he knows he can faithfully execute that role. He's not going to call someone in the ministry who's going to purposely go out there and ruin people's lives because they're going to fall into temptation and sin. Once again, it's very simple. We have the guidelines. We have right here, First Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 through 7, exactly what God wants in a leader inside the church. I don't know what makes it so hard. We as churches need to do our due diligence when we are selecting leadership inside the church, not just because we've known the guy for a year and we think he's a good dude. We need to be diligent in looking into this. I tell you what, once again, going back to my army experience, when I know that I'm going to get a new soldier in, especially if he is a leader, it's the first thing that I do in today's day and age? I go to their Facebook page because I want to see what quality of soldier am I getting. Am I getting a soldier who does not take his job seriously and he just be rather posting up videos and pictures of him drinking and doing inappropriate things? Or do I have somebody who is a professional in their everyday life, inside of work and outside of work? You may, is that wrong to judge off that? I don't think it is because that's their life that's out there. As churches, we should be doing that type of digging into the people that are going to lead the church. Abideth Forever says we should never be, quote, fans of pastors, nor should they be elevated over the Bible. Read the Bible, discern pastors. Exactly. Kathy also says the ways of the world and the current culture of any time influence what is accepted. Never can they call anything sin. And that's exactly what happened with, honestly, what I believe the seeker sensitive model megachurch that we see today. Once again, just my opinion. There are some good megachurches out there, but I think that's the exception, not the rule. Elaine said summed it up perfectly. Thank you very much, Elaine. Um, Annette writes in, welcome, Annette. Felt like I haven't seen you in a while. Says you can't slip through the cracks in a small church. Yeah, it is very, very much harder. They're going to call you out. Trust me, I've been to small churches. I've been to churches as low as 20 people inside the congregation. Everybody knows each other and everybody knows each other's business. And if you don't show up to church on Sunday, they're the first persons to call you and check up on you and say, hey, man, what's going on? Is everything okay? I noticed you weren't in church on Sunday. Just the other day, good example. When I was sick about 2 weeks ago, I didn't go to church on Sunday because I wasn't going to get everybody else sick. I was, running that 103 temperature. Normally, if I'm going to miss church, I end up messaging the pastor saying, hey, not going to be there today, just a courtesy thing. And I just didn't do it. Too sick, completely forgot, slipped my mind. I didn't want to bother him probably too, all those kind of stuff. Once I realized that I hadn't done it. So I just left it alone. That Monday, he messaged me and says, hey, brother, I missed you in church. I didn't hear any of the amens. And I looked around, saw you weren't there. Just want to make sure everything's good. Man, that meant a lot because then I got to tell him I was sick. And then he said, oh, I'm going to pray for you right now. That's what you get in those smaller churches. I highly doubt Stephen Furtick, if you don't show up on Sunday, is ever going to know. I mean, that's just me. Kathy said, Furtick says God calls the unqualified. I've never heard him say that, but it wouldn't surprise me. Elaine says, appearance / worldly talent is held in higher esteem than truth, faithfulness, and obedience to the word. And that is true with some churches. I'm definitely not all of them, but some of them. And sadly, some of those are some of the bigger ones. And that says it's like some men just appoint themselves to be leader. Not sure how many men get picked, but it would seem like we should be weeding them out a lot better. Yeah, and that goes up to another thing. I wasn't going to show this on here because it's not confirmed and it's coming from a news site that I don't trust very much. But apparently there is a Facebook post going around out there from a girl who was with this gentleman right here, Mr. Tim Sommers, who's accusing him of a lot of stuff in addition to what's already being accused of him. That's unverified. I wasn't going to show it simply because I couldn't verify that there are multiple people. Obviously, I can't verify everything out there, but if there are multiple people coming out, then that's enough for me to be like, hey, on the witness of, 2 or 3 witnesses or more, this is what's being said. But if it's just one person going off on Facebook, trying to jump on that train, I don't know. That could happen. While I don't think this guy is qualified, just based off the church that he goes to be a leader in a church, I'm not going to throw false accusations out against someone or at least entertain those. Annette also says, I've missed a lot of live shows, been catching up when I can. Missed you guys. Yeah, and part of that's my fault because my son is going to bed later and later, and it's taking him a little bit longer. He's getting like worse separation anxiety now that he's almost 1. So it's just getting really, bedtime is becoming a much longer routine than it used to be. But it's okay. I'm enjoying every second of being a parent. It's something I prayed to God for so many years, basically the whole time I've been married. So I'm going to enjoy every second of it, even if it takes forever to get him to bed. Kathy says, that's a great church and pastor, Tim. Yes, it really is. I was so blessed. God has blessed me. And just to move off into a slight side tangent. And for those of you who don't have a church home, I highly encourage you to look around your area. If it's not within 10 minutes, please look outside, go look 30 minutes, look an hour. An hour's drive is worth being around a community of awesome, amazing believers and having good teaching. Every time God has blessed me so much that every single time he's made me move, one of my biggest fears is how am I going to find a church? And I start my church search, before I even leave where I'm at. And I do my due diligence and I search, and God has always placed us in a church that has been solid. when we are honestly seeking after God and seeking after a solid church. There were some rough times in the beginning years before we actually became real Christians, and especially in the early years when we were trying to figure out, this Christianity thing. But as we read our Bible more and we prayed more and we relied on the Holy Spirit more, God was just leading us to better and better and better churches. And it's just been amazing. Um, Annette asked, what church are you talking about, Kathy? She was talking about my church. I was talking about how my pastor, when I was sick and I didn't show up, called me to see if everything was okay. Um, Elaine says that was in a reference to many of the mega churches that want to be well known and famous in the church world. Yes, exactly. And Kathy also says Stephen Furtick has a book called Unqualified. My old church studied in a small group, which is sad. He wrote that basically in a response to John MacArthur. Gave a one-liner to him. The Todd Friel, I think, was interviewing John MacArthur and said, give me a one-word answer, which MacArthur said he hates doing, and he's done it twice now, and it's gotten him in a bit of trouble. Which I don't have an issue with anything that he said in any of those one-liners, but the internet rages up a storm for it. And in one of those one-liners, they asked, he just said Stephen Furtick, and John MacArthur responded with unqualified. And Stephen Furtick apparently took that to heart so much that he decided to write a book called Unqualified and also put out a video called Hey Haters, basically digging on anybody that likes to study theology, which is really sad. But all right, so that's about all we're going to wrap up. I'm not going to belabor this subject too much. We don't know, once again, everything. This article does come from the Christian Post, and it's written by Leonardo Blair. We'll keep following it, and if more stuff breaks out from it, we will. I just want to once again leave people off on scripture. Once again, while this passage is out of context from the actual situation it's in, I think the principle absolutely applies. And it says in Ezekiel chapter 34, verse 10, this is what the Lord God says. Look, I am against the shepherds. I will demand my flock from them and prevent them from shepherding the flock. The shepherds will no longer feed themselves, for I will rescue my flock from their mouths so that they will not be food for them. God will protect the church. God will protect his sheep, and he will remove those who are not qualified. For this situation, we've yet to see exactly what's going on, but I just want to remind anybody that may be feeling despondent or anything like that, God protects his sheep, no matter what the answer is and the truth is in this situation. All right, I'll talk to y'all later. Y'all have a wonderful one. I appreciate y'all. And if y'all can too, please say some prayers for me. Family's going through a bit of a tough time regarding my father. One day I think I'll give y'all an update on it. But I could definitely use some prayers. Definitely use some prayers, and I appreciate y'all. If there's a way that I can pray for you, please drop that in the comments, and definitely want to pray for y'all as well too. All right, love y'all. Talk to y'all later.